My name is Claire Bennett, and I was 32 when my mother canceled my hotel suite while my plane was still somewhere over Kansas. She knew the Cascade Workforce Summit had booked out nearly every room in downtown Denver. She knew I was flying in to present a proposal that could change the next 5 years of my company. She also knew I had paid for that reservation with my own card, using points I had earned one stay at a time, one long work trip at a time. Her message came through the moment we started our final descent. Right as the flight attendants told everyone to switch their phones to airplane mode for landing, I had already read it by then. I canceled your suite. Paige and Derek need the space more than you do. Find somewhere to sleep in your car if you have to. And please don't embarrass this family at the summit. A second message followed with a screenshot attached. My reservation. My loyalty points. All of it had been folded into an upgrade attached to somebody else's booking, the Skyline suite. 2 bedrooms, a wraparound balcony, a clear view of the Rocky Mountain skyline lit up at night. My room hadn't disappeared. My mother had traded it upward, so the daughter she considered more photogenic could enjoy it instead. She expected me to land, swallow the humiliation quietly, and go looking for a motel off the interstate without making a sound. She had made that same bet on me for years, mistaking my silence for helplessness, mistaking my patience for something she could spend without ever paying it back. I want you to know something before I tell you what happened next. 3 minutes after I made one phone call, that entire reservation vanished, along with every smile in that suite. But the room was only the first domino to fall. What came after exposed exactly why my family had really flown to Denver, and what they were planning to take from me before I ever stepped up to that podium. Before I get into that part, tell me something. What time is it right where you're sitting? And what city are you watching this from tonight? I want to see how far a story like this one actually travels. When the plane reached the gate and I switched my phone off airplane mode, 2 hotel notifications were already sitting there waiting for me. The first confirmed my reservation had been canceled at 3:42 in the afternoon. The second showed that my loyalty points had been transferred into a new booking, one registered under my mother's name. Hotel policy didn't allow another guest to use those points without written authorization, which meant somebody had submitted a document claiming I had approved it myself, in my own handwriting. I didn't stand up right away. I sat in my seat a little longer than I needed to, and before I even reached for my carry-on, I saved every screenshot and forwarded every notification straight to my own email. My family expected anger from me. They weren't prepared for evidence. At baggage claim, I spotted my older sister, Paige, standing beside her fiancé, Derek. Both of them wore summit credentials around their necks. Though neither one of them had worked a single day in workforce development in their lives, Paige ran a lifestyle account built around luxury travel photos and captions about chasing her best life. Derek called himself a growth strategist, though he had never held one job long enough to prove what exactly he'd grown. Paige smiled the second she saw me. That particular smile she saves for moments she already knows are going to hurt someone. "Claire," she said, tilting her head like she was breaking gentle news to a child. "Mom told us there was a little problem with your room." "A little problem," I repeated, keeping my voice level. "What kind of problem?" "She canceled it while you were in the air," Paige said, like she was reading off a weather report instead of confessing to fraud. "It wasn't personal. The hotel offered an upgrade, and Mom thought it made more sense to keep the family together in one nicer space." "Then why wasn't I included in that space?" "There's only 1 extra bedroom," she said. "The hotel website lists 3. Derek looked up from his phone just long enough to hide a grin behind his knuckles. "You could sleep in the sitting room if you really need to," he offered. "Fair warning, it's the VIP floor. Might be a little different from what you're used to. I'll find my own place." He laughed under his breath. "City's sold out." "Claire, Don't let pride ruin your summit for you. I asked Paige to show me the reservation confirmation. She turned her phone away from me a beat too late. And in that beat, I caught the tail end of a message thread from our mother. Once Claire realizes she has nowhere suitable to stay, she'll accept our terms. Paige's thumb moved fast, locking the screen before I could read further. What terms? I asked. Her smile flickered, just for a second, and then came back stronger, like she was resetting it by hand. You shouldn't be reading private messages. You held it up in front of my face. Derek stepped between us. All business now. The car's waiting outside. We'll sort this out properly once we're at the hotel. I'm not getting in your car. Paige crossed her arms. Then what exactly are you going to do? Call Nate? I went still. I hadn't told either of them who I'd called, which meant my mother had already been discussing my next moves with them, before I'd even made any. Enjoy the ride, I said instead. But you might want to check your reservation first. I picked up my suitcase and started walking. I didn't get more than a dozen steps before Paige's phone rang behind me. I heard her answer, heard the confusion land in her voice a half-second later. What do you mean the suite's unavailable? We have a confirmation number. A pause. No, that can't be right. We're standing right here. Derek grabbed the phone out of her hand like volume alone might fix it. I kept walking toward the exit, but I let myself listen. Paige's voice climbed higher behind me, sharp enough now that a few travelers near the carousel turned to look. Claire, her voice cracked on my name. What did you do? I didn't stop walking. I reported an unauthorized use of my account, and a signature I never gave anyone permission to use. The hotel made its own decision after that. I didn't make it for them. Fix it, Derek was saying to someone on the other end of the line, his voice climbing toward panic. You told me accommodations weren't supposed to be a factor for serious professionals. Their faces had gone tight by the time I reached the sliding doors, the kind of tight that comes right before people start performing calm for an audience they didn't ask for. I didn't look back to watch it happen. I collected my suitcase from where the porter had set it down, and I kept walking toward the taxi line, my phone already buzzing in my coat pocket with a call I'd been half expecting since the moment I read that first message on the plane. Claire? Nate's voice was steady in a way that made my shoulders drop half an inch, the first real breath I'd taken since the plane landed. I got your email chain about 10 minutes ago. Our fraud team already flagged it before you called. How bad is it? The authorization form used to transfer your points came in with a signature that doesn't match anything on file for you. It's a close copy, but it's not yours. Whoever submitted it also used a sponsor code that isn't tied to your mother's name at all. It's tied to the Halbrook Foundation. I stopped walking. Around me, the taxi line kept moving. Drivers calling out names, luggage wheels clicking against the curb, and none of it registered anymore. Say that again. The Skyline suite was originally held for Halbrook's board members. 3 days ago, someone reassigned it through a sponsor authorization, paperwork claiming your mother would be hosting a private strategy dinner for prospective foundation partners. Your points got added afterward, probably to make the whole thing look a little more personal and a little less official. This was never about Paige needing a bedroom. No, Nate said, it really wasn't. I asked him how something like that even makes it through a hotel's own systems without anyone noticing. He explained it plainly, the way he explains everything, like a man who has spent 6 years watching families do exactly this kind of thing to each other. Loyalty accounts under one household often share a login for convenience, especially when a parent set the account up originally. A scanned signature on a sponsor form doesn't get checked against a live signature at the front desk, not unless someone flags it first. The system trusts paperwork until paperwork gives it a reason not to. Someone had been counting on exactly that gap. I told him I needed a minute, and he stayed on the line while I found a bench near the rental car counters and sat down. I want to be honest about what that minute actually felt like, because it wasn't only about the money or the room. Somebody had taken my name and written it in a shape that wasn't mine, on a document I never saw, for a purpose I never agreed to. There's a specific kind of cold that comes with that. It isn't the same as being lied to. It's closer to finding out a version of you has been out in the world, doing things you didn't do, agreeing to things you never agreed to, and you're the last person who gets told about it. "You still there?" Nate asked. "I'm here." I pressed my palm flat against my knee until it stopped feeling like the ground was tilting. I just need to understand what she actually wanted out of this. A stolen suite doesn't get you anything real. There has to be more to it. "Your mother contacted me 2 weeks ago," Nate said, and something in his tone shifted. "Careful now. The way people get right before they hand you something they know is going to hurt." She asked whether the hotel could limit summit access for an attendee staying off property. I told her policy doesn't work that way. She framed it as a general question, so I didn't put your name to it until this morning. She planned this 2 weeks ago. She also asked whether accommodation problems could keep someone out of private sponsor sessions. I closed my eyes. Somewhere behind me, a shuttle bus hissed its brakes, and the mountain air felt too thin all of a sudden, like it couldn't quite fill my lungs the way it was supposed to. "Send me everything you have," I said. "The timeline, the sponsor authorization, all of it. Already forwarding it now." Claire, whatever she's building toward, it's bigger than a hotel room. I opened my laptop right there on the bench, my hands steadier than I expected them to be, and I started reading. The summit ran a private events portal for sponsors and partners, the kind of page most attendees never bother opening because it's buried 3 clicks deep under the main schedule. I found it anyway, because Nate's timeline had mentioned a reception tied to the sponsor code on my stolen suite. I typed in the search field, and a listing came up titled Bennett Career Alliance Reception, presented in partnership with the Holbrook Foundation. My mother was named as host. Paige was listed as creative director. Derek was listed as investment advisor, a title he had apparently given himself sometime between the airport and the hotel. I read the description once. Then I read it again, slower, because the first time through, some part of my brain refused to accept what my eyes were telling it. A digital mentorship network connecting first-generation trade workers with established employers through structured matching measurable outcomes and data-backed placement tracking. It was Bridgeworks. Not similar to Bridgeworks. It was my project, described in language close enough to my own pitch deck that I could have matched sentences to slides. My hand stayed on the trackpad, not moving, while the rest of the page loaded around it. I read the paragraph a third time, waiting for it to say something different, the way you check a text message twice, hoping the words rearrange themselves into something less painful the second time. 6 months earlier, I had shown my mother an early draft of this exact plan, sitting across from her at her kitchen table with my laptop open and my hands shaking a little, the way they always used to shake whenever I asked her to actually see me as someone capable of building something. She had scrolled through it for maybe 4 minutes. Then she'd closed the laptop gently, like she was doing me a kindness, and told me it was too unrealistic to attract serious funding, that I shouldn't embarrass myself by presenting something unfinished to people who mattered. Now she had copied it, almost word for word, and arranged a private dinner with the exact board evaluating my grant application. Sitting there on that bench, I found myself thinking about something that had nothing to do with hotel rooms or reception listings. 2 years ago, I'd walked away from a junior role at her consulting firm, quietly, without making a scene. After I found a client outcomes report that had been adjusted before it went out, the numbers made a workforce training program look far more successful than it actually was, Because the report had quietly dropped an entire cohort of participants who'd left the program before completion. I never told anyone why I really left. I let people assume I wanted to build something of my own instead, which was true, just not the whole truth. I'd stayed quiet back then because she begged me to, because she said the business supported our whole family, and I'd be the one responsible if it fell apart. I hadn't thought about that report in months. Sitting there with her stolen version of my life's work open on my screen, it came back whole. The exact wording of that dropped cohort. The exact percentage that had been rounded up past what the real numbers ever supported. Her plan finally made sense. She wanted me displaced, desperate, and dependent enough on her family's version of events that once I accepted a place inside their reception, she could pressure me into withdrawing my proposal entirely, or folding it into hers, or accepting some minor position inside my own creation. If I refused, she could tell Halbrook I was unstable, unprepared, difficult, the daughter who caused a hotel scandal on the eve of a major grant decision. I built a folder, every draft I'd ever written, going back 16 months. Interview transcripts, survey data, pilot program budgets, results from my first cohort, every email I had ever sent Halbrook's program office. I forwarded the entire archive to Nate and to the attorney who had helped me incorporate Bridgeworks in the first place. Then, almost as an afterthought, I checked Paige's social media. She'd posted a photo from the hotel lobby 20 minutes earlier, captioned with something about how some people wait for opportunities while others create the rooms where decisions actually happen. In the corner of the image, half cropped out, sat the invitation card for tonight's reception, and in the bottom corner of that invitation, small but unmistakable, was the logo I had designed for Bridgeworks myself, late one night, 3 years before any of this started. I saved the post before it could disappear. Minutes later, Paige uploaded a second image, a video clip of our mother arguing with a manager at the front desk, captioned, "Unexpected hotel chaos. But real leaders adapt." She'd meant it as mockery, a little dig at my expense for anyone scrolling past. What she'd actually done was document, in her own handwriting, that both of them already knew the investigation was happening before I ever said a word to either of their faces. I sat with that for a moment longer than I needed to, not because I didn't know what to do next, but because I wanted to understand why I was choosing to do it this way. Part of me, the tired part, wanted to close the laptop, book a flight home, and let the whole family have their reception and their stolen slide deck and their photographs. It would have been easier. It also would have handed my mother exactly the story she wanted told about me. The version where I got overwhelmed and walked away, rather than the version where I stood in a room and made her answer for what she'd done. That's the real reason I didn't just get on an elevator and disappear for the rest of the weekend. Walking away doesn't end anything with someone like her. It only clears the stage for her to narrate what happened in my absence. Staying, showing up calm, letting people watch me hold my composure while she couldn't hold hers. That was the only version of this where the record stayed accurate. I texted Renata Voss, Halbrook's program director, someone I'd exchanged maybe 4 professional emails with over the past 7 months. I kept it short. I told her I'd discovered a potential conflict involving my submitted proposal and a sponsor-hosted reception promoting a nearly identical concept, and that I had documentation, and that I wasn't interested in making public accusations before she'd had a chance to see the evidence herself. She replied faster than I expected. 4 minutes, maybe less. "Meet me in conference room C at 6:15. Bring everything." I closed the laptop and sat there for one more breath, watching travelers move past the rental counters with their rolling suitcases and their normal Tuesdays. None of them carrying anything close to what I was carrying. Then I stood, smoothed down my jacket, and walked toward the parking structure where my car service was waiting. My family believed they had taken away the one thing I needed tonight: a place to sleep. What they'd actually done, without meaning to, was hand me a map of exactly where they intended to steal my future from. They thought the missing suite was my only move. They had no idea it was only the first one. I changed into the blazer I'd packed in my carry-on right there in the back seat of the car, folding my travel clothes into the empty space where my suitcase sat. And by the time we pulled up outside the hotel, I didn't look like a woman who'd spent the last 2 hours discovering her own life had been quietly stolen from her. I looked like someone who had somewhere important to be. I did. Conference room C was waiting, and so was proof that would be far harder for my mother to talk her way around than a canceled reservation ever was. The hotel lobby was already crowded by the time I walked in. Executives and founders and summit speakers clustered in loose circles under the chandeliers, badges catching the light every time someone turned their head. I hadn't made it 20 feet past the doors before I saw her. My mother stood near the front desk with Paige and Derek, speaking to a manager in that particular controlled tone she uses whenever she wants anger to sound like authority instead. She wore a gold pin identifying her as an invited summit advisor. Halbrook had asked her to moderate a panel on ethical leadership later that week, a detail that would have been almost funny if it weren't so exactly like her. She spotted me near the elevators before I could slip past. "Claire, come here. We need to resolve this misunderstanding." She smiled while she said it, because people were watching, because a smile in front of an audience has always been one of her sharpest tools. "The hotel says you reported our reservation as fraudulent." I reported the use of my account and a signature I never authorized. "You should have called me first." "You canceled my room while I was still in the air. Circumstances changed pretty quickly after that." Her smile hardened, just slightly, at the edges. "Lower your voice." I hadn't raised it. She dismissed the manager with a small wave of her hand and guided the three of us toward a seating area near the windows, out of easy earshot from the front desk. "The hotels offered us 3 executive rooms," she said. Sitting down like this was already settled. "You can use one." "Under whose name?" "Mine. And what do I owe you in exchange for that?" Derek answered too quickly. Before she could, "Nobody said there was an exchange." Paige's message said otherwise. The one about me accepting your terms once I had nowhere suitable left to stay. Paige glanced around the lobby, suddenly very interested in the carpet pattern. My mother finally let the performance drop, just enough for the truth underneath it to show through. "Your proposal overlaps with a larger family initiative," she said. "Halbrook shouldn't be receiving 2 competing versions from people who share the same last name. It makes us look disorganized." "My proposal existed before your initiative did." "Your proposal is an early-stage concept. Mine has institutional credibility and a professional team behind it. Your team is Paige and Derek?" Derek bristled. "I have investor relationships." "You have a job title you gave yourself in an airport?" My mother raised one hand, the universal signal she uses to end a conversation she's losing. "This attitude proves my concern. You're talented, Claire, but you're not ready to manage something at this scale. Withdraw from tomorrow's grant presentation. The initiative moves forward through Bennett Career Alliance. You can join as program manager, draw a salary, and get exposure you'd never secure any other way." "Who owns the platform?" She hesitated half a second. "The family company. Who controls the grant funding?" "The board." "Who receives founder credit?" Silence, just long enough to answer the question on its own. "Titles can be discussed later," she finally said. "They wanted my research, my model, my funding relationship, in exchange for a chair at my own table." "And if I refuse?" "Then I'll have to tell Halbrook the truth about your readiness. No major investors, no established office, no executive team. You arrived without accommodations and caused a compliance dispute before the summit even started. Those facts raise questions. You caused that dispute. It'll be difficult to prove otherwise without making yourself look vindictive. She believed, the way she always has, that composed language could quietly erase whatever the documents underneath it actually said. I need your answer before the reception, she told me, checking the delicate watch on her wrist. You have 8 minutes. I checked my own phone instead. No, I said, you have 8 minutes. I turned toward the elevators without waiting to see her face change. Renata Voss was already in conference room C when I arrived, along with Hallbrook's legal counsel and an ethics coordinator I hadn't met before. I laid everything out on the table between us. My original submission from 16 months ago. The full development archive, research interviews, survey data, pilot budgets, results. My trademark filing from 12 months back. Emails I'd sent Hallbrook's program office 7 months before my mother ever announced her reception. Pages post showing my own logo on their invitation card. The duplicated reception description, side by side with my proposal's language. Renata compared the two summaries herself, line by line, her expression giving away nothing. Did you authorize Bennett Career Alliance to use this material? No. Did you agree to collaborate with them in any capacity? No. Did your mother have access to your work at any point? She saw one early draft. 6 months ago, she told me it wasn't realistic enough to fund. Hallbrook's attorney asked whether I wanted my own presentation postponed while they sorted through the conflict. Renata answered before I could. Her presentation isn't the conflict here. The undisclosed duplicate reception is... She looked at me directly. We're going to suspend it while the evidence gets reviewed properly. My mother may tell people I sabotaged her. She might, Renata said. But the foundation is the one canceling the event, not you. When I finally checked my phone again, it showed 14 missed calls and 1 new message from my mother. Stop before you damage this family permanently. I didn't answer it. I'd learned a long time ago that answering messages like that one only teaches her the threat works. The opening keynote started 20 minutes later, and my mother slid into the seat beside mine like nothing had happened between us in the last hour, like the whole lobby conversation had simply never occurred. You went to Hallbrook, she said under her breath, not looking at me, her eyes fixed straight ahead on the stage. I told you that you had 8 minutes. I used them. Withdraw the complaint, Claire, or I'll make sure everyone in this room knows exactly why no serious company has hired you into senior leadership since you left mine. I left because I found altered client reports, a cohort that got quietly dropped so the numbers would look better than they actually were. You know exactly which one I mean? Her fingers tightened around the edge of her printed program. 2 years ago, I'd resigned quietly rather than make that discovery public, because she'd begged me not to destroy a business that supported half our extended family. I'd mistaken her gratitude for something permanent. It wasn't. It was a debt she expected me to keep paying indefinitely, in silence, for as long as she needed it. You signed a confidentiality agreement, she said. It doesn't protect fraud. On stage, the keynote speaker had moved on to a section of her talk about ethical leadership, about what happens when people in positions of trust quietly abuse the power that trust gives them. My mother sat perfectly still beside me through the rest of it, silent in a way I had genuinely never seen from her before, staring straight ahead at a stage where, in 3 days, she was scheduled to moderate a panel on exactly that subject. I let the silence sit between us. I didn't need to say anything else. The room was already saying it for me. I was at the workshop by 7:30 the next morning, a session on scalable mentorship systems. 3 Hallbrook board members seated in the front row with their coffee and their notepads. I hadn't planned to speak much. I ended up answering more questions than the actual facilitator did. Walking through how structured matching and outcome tracking could keep a placement program from turning into a symbolic gesture that looks good in a press release and does nothing for the people it claims to serve. A few attendees asked for my pilot data before the session even ended. That was when my mother walked in. She wasn't alone. Paige and Derek flanked her, and behind them came a man I didn't recognize yet. Silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of quiet confidence that only comes from writing large checks for a very long time. Derek was already distributing glossy folders branded with the Bennett Career Alliance logo before anyone had a chance to ask who he was. I hope my daughter didn't overwhelm everyone with concepts still under family review, my mother said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Smiling that same public smile. My proposal isn't under family review, I said. She gave the room an apologetic little laugh, the kind designed to make me look unstable instead of accurate. Claire is passionate. She sometimes confuses preliminary internal discussions with independently developed work. The silver-haired man stepped forward. I'm Grant Ossie, he said, extending a hand toward me first, which I noticed my mother didn't like. Is there an ownership dispute here? Halbrook is reviewing the matter, I said. My mother sighed, the picture of patient concern. Claire recently left a junior role at my firm under difficult circumstances. This summit's pressure appears to have affected her judgment. Yesterday, she even caused our hotel reservation to be canceled over a family misunderstanding. We're worried about her, Paige added softly. Right on cue. They were building a story where every defense I made would sound like an emotional overreaction instead of a fact. Derek opened one of his folders. We have records showing this initiative was developed through Bennett Career Alliance. What's the earliest date on those records? I asked. This isn't really the place, he said. You chose the place. My mother's voice sharpened. Claire, enough. You've accused me publicly now. What date did your project actually begin? Derek answered for her. Late last year. My first pilot began 16 months ago, I said. My trademark application was filed 12 months ago. Halbrook received my preliminary proposal 7 months ago. I pulled up the public trademark record on my phone and held it toward Grant. He studied the date for a long moment. Diane, he said, using my mother's first name for the first time. Did you know about this timeline? Claire showed me an informal family concept, she said. I encouraged her to develop it professionally. Nothing more. You told me it was too idealistic to attract serious funding. I said, that's not how I remember any of this. Fortunately, Renata's voice came from the doorway. You emailed her. She stepped into the room with Halbrook's legal counsel behind her and displayed the message on her tablet for everyone near enough to see. This model is too idealistic to attract serious funding. Stop wasting time on it and support something established instead. Beneath it, my reply, confirming I intended to keep going without her. The room went very quiet. Bennett Career Alliance is prohibited from distributing any materials related to the disputed proposal, effective immediately, Renata said. That's a foundation directive, not a family disagreement. This is only a misunderstanding between a mother and her daughter. My mother tried. It stopped being that, Renata said. The moment Halbrook's sponsor code, foundation guests, and summit venue got used to promote disputed intellectual property. Grant took a full step back from my mother, putting visible distance between them. Renata turned toward Derek next. I need to see the original authorization used to transfer Claire's reservation and loyalty points. Derek's face changed first. His hand started moving before his voice did, fumbling with the folder he was still holding. The signature on file traces back to an account registered under your name, Renata said to him directly. Every person in that room turned to look at him at once. "Diane gave me the form," he said, the words tumbling out too fast to stop. "She told me Claire had already approved it. She said the points belonged to a shared family account." "Derek!" My mother's voice cracked like a whip. "Stop talking." He didn't. The suite was supposed to secure the donor dinner. Diane said Claire would cooperate once she got here, that she'd sign a withdrawal and we could announce the combined program before her presentation even happened. Who gave you the form? Who told you it was approved? Who decided which daughter got credited as co-founder? Nobody in that room needed to ask those 3 questions out loud anymore, because Derek had just answered every one of them himself, in front of a Hallbrook board member, in front of a major donor, in front of the daughter he'd helped push out of her own suite 2 days earlier. Paige tried to step in. "Derek, that's not—" "There's already a draft announcement," he said, turning to face her now instead of me. "It names you as co-founder, Paige." I saw it on her laptop last night. Paige's mouth opened and nothing came out. Whatever alliance the 3 of them had walked into that room with had just come apart in front of a dozen witnesses, faster than any of them could manage to explain it away. Hallbrook's staff moved in within minutes, suspending my mother's advisor credentials, revoking Bennett Career Alliance's sponsor access, escorting all 3 of them out of the workshop area while the remaining attendees watched in a silence that had nowhere left to hide. My presentation was still 2 hours away when all of that happened, and somewhere in the middle of those 2 hours, Renata warned me my mother had filed a new complaint, this one claiming I'd used confidential data lifted from her consulting firm. If Hallbrook took it seriously, my proposal could be disqualified before I ever opened my mouth. "I can identify the source of every data set I'm using," I told her. "Every single one." When I walked into the presentation hall, nearly 70 people were already seated, facing the Hallbrook review panel at the front of the room. My mother sat near the back beside Paige. Derek was nowhere in sight. Hallbrook's attorneys had asked for his records not long after the workshop ended, and he hadn't reappeared since. I began without mentioning any of them. I walked through the problem Bridgeworks was built to solve, the way talented trade school graduates often get encouragement, but never consistent access to the employers who could actually hire them. No structured path, no measurable outcomes, no real sponsorship pipeline connecting the 2 sides. I presented the matching system, the privacy protections built into it, the governance model, pilot results, retention improvements, projected costs. Every figure I put on the screen had a documented source behind it. During questions, a board member asked how I planned to keep the platform from depending entirely on my own personal network to function. I explained the decentralized mentor pool, the independent oversight structure built specifically to prevent that. Another asked, more carefully, whether this morning's family conflict created any reputational risk for Hallbrook. "The conflict is exactly why governance matters," I said. "A mission-driven organization can't run on verbal promises, family trust, or private influence. Ownership, data rights, and decision-making authority all have to be documented, in writing, before anything goes wrong. Not after." Grant leaned forward slightly. "Did any of this research originate from Bennett Career Alliance?" "No. Appendix 7 lists every partner organization, every collection date, every written permission I obtained. None of it traces back to my mother's firm." Renata reviewed the appendix herself and confirmed the sources out loud, for the record. My mother raised her hand and was given 2 minutes to respond. She walked to the standing microphones at the side of the room, composed again, every trace of the workshop's chaos smoothed back into place. "No one disputes my daughter's intelligence," she said. "My concern is that she's built a public accusation around what was, at its core, ordinary family support. I reviewed her early drafts. I introduced her to professionals. I funded her education. Now she presents herself as a victim because I tried to build a stronger organization around an idea we discussed together as a family. It worked because part of it was true, and that's exactly what made it dangerous. She had paid for parts of my education. She had opened real doors for me, years ago, before any of this. She had also decided somewhere along the way that support came with permanent ownership attached, an invoice she could call due whenever it suited her. I asked to respond, and Renata nodded. Support deserves gratitude, I said. It doesn't create retroactive ownership. A parent who pays for someone's music lessons doesn't own every song their adult child writes 20 years later. My mother helped me. She didn't create this research. She didn't fund this pilot. She didn't design this platform, and she was never given permission to present it as her own. When I refused to hand it over, my reservation got canceled, my signature got copied, and a sponsor reception got arranged to announce my work under someone else's name. The question was never whether she supported me once. The question is whether that support ever gave her the right to take what I built afterward. It didn't. The board recessed to the hallway to deliberate. I stayed where I was, my hands finally steady against the podium, and watched my mother's face while she realized, slowly, that this particular room wasn't going to give her the ending she'd already written for it. Paige found me in the hallway while the board deliberated. Derek had already left the summit entirely, she said, telling anyone who'd listen that Diane had set him up from the start. You knew, I said, that you knew she planned to pressure me into withdrawing. I thought you'd join us. Program manager first, co-founder eventually. Once things settled. Paige looked away from me, down at her own hands. The platform needed branding. You've never been good at that part. You could have proposed an actual partnership instead. Something honest. You would have said no. So you decided my consent didn't matter at all. She flinched, like the sentence had landed somewhere she hadn't braced for. And then, quieter than I'd heard her speak all weekend, something slipped out that she probably hadn't planned on saying. Do you remember when we were kids, how she used to line up our report cards side by side on the kitchen table, not to celebrate either of us, just to measure which one of us was winning that semester? Paige's voice caught. I figured out early that there wasn't room for both of us to be the good daughter at the same time, so I stopped trying to be good. I got good at being impressive instead. I hadn't expected that. Not there. Not from her. Not after everything. It didn't undo what she'd done. It did explain, finally, some of why she'd done it. Did you know the presentation used my actual work? I asked her. She didn't answer that one. She didn't need to. When the board reconvened, Halbrook announced my proposal would advance to final grant review, with my independent ownership formally recognized in writing. Bennett Career Alliance was removed from all summit programming. My mother's advisor position was terminated on the spot, and the foundation opened an external audit into every report her firm had submitted to them over the past 6 years. She found me afterward near the elevators and told me to follow her outside. You're not required to leave, Renata said, standing close enough that the offer felt like protection rather than suggestion. I stayed exactly where I was. My mother waited a moment, the way she always used to, for the old reflex that had spent 30 years making me follow her out of rooms. It didn't come. When she understood that, she turned and walked out alone. We met one more time that evening in the hotel cafe at her request. She arrived without a greeting. Halbrook is reviewing 6 years of client reports, she said. If they terminate our contracts, people could lose their jobs over this. That decision belongs to Halbrook, not to me. Don't pretend you had no role in it. You copied nothing. But you certainly aimed everything you found directly at me. I was protecting my own work. You were protecting your control over mine. She studied me for a long moment. You think this is a victory? Your sister's engagement is over. My firm may not survive this. Our name is already being discussed by attorneys. I stopped being responsible for decisions I didn't make a long time ago. You could have handled this privately. You planned to announce my work publicly, using public foundation resources in front of my own funders. Privacy only started mattering to you once the evidence showed up. She leaned forward. I gave you every opportunity you've ever had in your life. Claire, I kept an invisible invoice for every bit of it. Tuition, introductions, recommendations. Every single thing became a reason you were supposed to hand your judgment over to me later. Whenever I decided to collect, that's cruel. It's accurate. Then she reached for the thing that had worked on me for years. If you keep cooperating with this investigation, there may be no relationship left between us afterward. In the past, I would have softened here, apologized for something I hadn't done, just to keep a door open that she controlled the only key to. This time I understood something simpler. A relationship that only survives when I stay quiet was never really a relationship. It was a condition. Answer me, she said. What happens now? I'll answer every factual question the investigators ask me. I won't exaggerate, and I won't go to the press. I also won't protect you from anything you've already documented yourself into. She left without another word. 7 months later, Halbrook approved the full grant after my expansion pilot exceeded every target we'd projected. Bridgeworks hired 4 new employees and adopted strict conflict of interest policies written into our founding documents. Halbrook's audit found that several of my mother's reports had inflated outcomes for years. The exact same kind of quiet adjustment I'd once found and walked away from. She stepped down as chief executive not long after. Paige started her own branding consultancy, using work she could finally point to and call entirely her own. And emailed me once to say she understood a little late that our mother had never intended to give either of us real control over anything. My mother's message came a few weeks after that. 7 words. I should not have signed your name. I saved it, filed with everything else, because I've learned that forgiveness and documentation can exist in the same folder at the same time. Her smile used to be the thing I rushed to rebuild every time it disappeared. This time, when it was gone, I let it stay that way, and for the first time in my life, that felt like the correct ending instead of an unfinished one.